Oh, hello. It's been a long time coming, because Warpcoven are one of those teams that I find quite difficult to work out, right? But here it is, the faction focus, or deep dive, or whatever we're calling this series today, all about Warpcoven. Let's get straight into it. What are the Warpcoven? Well, the Warpcoven are a team that, effectively, what it lets you do is it lets you mix Rubric Marines and Zangors, right? Space Goats. Now, it says recon with a star and security with a star. Essentially, you have to look down here. If you include 4 or more Marines, that's what Incarna Astartes basically means. If you include 4 or more Marines, then you have security. If you include 5 or more Sangors, then you have recon. The team's really interesting. So you have to have a sorcerer, okay? And now there's a lot of... If you've watched the Necron video, think Necron Lord levels of customization. There's a lot of customization that goes into these sorcerers, and it goes onto your roster, right? A good half of this video is going to be spent talking about the sorcerers, okay? So your sorcerer. Now, at the weapon level, you can give him a bolt pistol, a close combat weapon, or a warp flame pistol, but you can only have one warp flame pistol per kill team, right? Then you effectively got 10 slots. But each thing that looks like a marine takes up 2 slots. And each thing that looks like a goat takes up 1 slot, right? So in your 10 slots, you can have up to 2 more sorcerers, right? You can have a gunner, right? You can have an icon bearer, or you can have a basic marine, right? Those are all the marines. Alternatively, you can have a Zangor champion, a Zangor fighter, a Zangor horn bearer, and a Zangor icon warrior. Now, you can have multiple of the Rubric Marine Warrior and the Sangor Fighter if you want to. And if you have 4 Rubric Marine Operatives, you can have a second gunner. But don't make the mistake, it says Rubric Marine there, not Arcana Astartes. So your sorcerers do not count as Rubric Marine Operatives for the purposes of that second gunner. So what I would suggest as a beginner build, right, a take-all-comers build, you're going to take 3 sorcerers. One of them you give a warp flame pistol to, because it's really pretty cool, and you can have one in your team. And then you take 1 gunner, and your gunner, I will go into this more on the gunner slide, but to cut to the chase, your gunner is going to have a Soul Reaper cannon. I should mention, by the way, even if you can take 2 gunners, the way it's set up means that you can only ever have 1 Soul Reaper cannon, so bear that in mind as well, okay? So a gunner with a Soul Reaper cannon, and then you're going to take an Icon Bearer and a Warrior. So you're going to be playing at Elite, you're going to have 6 Marines on the table, 3 Sorcerers, a Gunner, an Icon, and a Warrior. And then later on, when you're comfortable with that team, you can consider buying a box of Zangors, and then you can swap in some Zangors when you would feel it would be appropriate to be. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have an inkling of when, if ever, it might be appropriate to swap a Marine out for a Sangor, right? The first special mechanic that they have are boons. And you'll notice that I've gone to town with the red highlighter pen here, and I've highlighted a load of text on this page in red, because this is... There are two things at play here. Number one is whenever they have boons of chaos, of any kind in any game, they always include rules for you rolling them randomly. I know nobody who rolls them randomly. Even Zimbad, who, even though he's a good player, he tells me over and over again, I just play war games to have fun, I don't take them seriously, I don't want to do the optimal thing, I just want to pick things because they seem fun. Even he, I have never seen him sit at the table and go, I'm going to roll randomly for my mutations. Like, I don't know who's doing this, and yet they clog up the rulebook with all these bits of rules for when you're randomly rolling. The second thing that's at play here is narrative play. So in narrative play, people can gain mutations as they go along, alright? So I'm going to read it through twice, once with all the extra text, and once cleaned up for match play purposes. So, Boons of Tzeentch. Boons of Tzeentch are Chaos Blessings available to Warpcoven operatives. When a Sorcerer operative is added to your roster or dataset, it gains 1 Boon of Tzeentch. Select or randomly determine one for it to gain, as described below. When an operative gains a Boon of Tzeentch by any other means, i.e. Warpcoven Spec Ops rules, page 111. Roll 1d6. On a 1 to 2, randomly determine one for it to gain. On a 3-up, select or randomly determine one for it to gain. As an operative can never have the same boon more than once, if randomly determined, and neither order of results would determine a unique boon, roll again. Make note of each operative's boon of each on your data slate. When you select a boon for a sorcerer operative to gain, you can select one from any of the categories to the right, but you cannot select one a sorcerer operative on your roster or data slate already has. When you randomly determine a boon for a sorcerer operative to gain, roll 2d3, selecting one result to determine the category of the boon and the other result to determine the boon. When you select a boon for a Zangor operative to gain, you must select one from the mutation category. But you cannot select a Zangor operative on your roster or dataset already has. When you randomly determine a boon for a Zangor operative to gain, you roll 1d3 to determine the boon from the mutation category. Right. So, for us as matched play people, what's actually relevant there is boons of Tzitz are Chaos Blessings available to Warpcoven operatives. When a Sorcerer operative is added to your roster or data slate, it gains one boon of Tzitz. Select one for it to gain as described below. When you select a boon for a Sorcerer operative to gain, you can select one from any of the categories on your right, but you cannot select one for a sorcerer operative on your roster or data slate already has. And that's it. So you when you build a sorcerer, you pick one of these boons, and the boon is noted on your roster, and you can't double up on boons. And genuinely, that's all this is. Why? I'll explain why, but it's irritating to me that they had to use so many words to explain something quite straightforward. Excuse me. Oh, dear me. Babies. We've also got psychic actions. So, there are 3 schools of magic: the Destiny Discipline, the Tempiric Discipline, and the Warp Fire Discipline. You have 3 sorcerers, so realistically, each sorcerer is going to belong to one of these disciplines, because you're not allowed, once again, to double up. Let's briefly look at what these disciplines give you. So the Destiny Discipline gives you a buff in the form of Weave Fate. You select one friendly Warpcoven operative visible to this operative. Until the end of the turning point, each time a shooting attack is made against that operative, in the roll defense dice step of that shooting attack, you can reroll any or all of your defense dice. A powerful buff if you know that you've got a guy who's pretty exposed, but you can get your sorcerer commit is able to see him. You'll be able to buff him with this to try and keep him alive if you've got him in a bit of a dodgy position. So that's good. We've also got a pretty good debuff in the form of Twist Destiny. Select one enemy operative visible to this operative until the end of the turning point each time that enemy operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack. In the roll attack dice step of the shooting attack, your opponent cannot reroll their attack dice. And also, that enemy ignores all positive modifiers to APL. So it's more situational. You will know if your opponent has lots of access to rerolls in that particular turn, or if your opponent is likely to get bonus APL in that particular turn. And it can be a really good way of, if your opponent's got a complicated little Rube Goldberg machine going on where he's going to use the comms to give someone an extra APL, and then they're going to be able to do this and this and this and this, and that's going to swing the game for them. If you catch it, you can absolutely shut it down with this, which is great. Okay. But I think it is situational. It's something that you have and will use occasionally. You won't even necessarily use it in every game. You've also got Doom Bolt, which is the best, I think, it's the single target long range weapon, psychic weapon. So you roll 4 dice hitting on 3s. You're doing 3 damage, lethal 5 up, and any of those 5s and 6s that you do get will be doing mortal wounds too, so it's effectively 5 damage. That's pretty good. Considering how many... Oh, I'm so sorry. Considering how many dice you get, that's pretty good. Then we've got the Tempiric Discipline. So this has ephemeral instability until the end of the turning point. Subtract circle from the distance that enemy operatives can move when performing charge and dash actions. I cannot overstate to you how much I believe that Temperic Discipline is a key to their strategy. Now, it could just be that when I was playing against a lot of Warpcoven, I was playing with my Novitiates a lot. Novitiates really don't like losing out on movement because they really want to be in combat, because they're really vulnerable when they are not in combat. So, there's something to be said to using a point on this particular sorcerer every turn just to turn on ephemeral instability. Notice as well, it doesn't need to be line of sight, range, none of these things. You just go, yep, that's turned on, you can't do this thing. Temporal manipulation. Select one friendly Warpcoven operative visible to and within red of this operative. That operative regains 2d3 lost wounds. So you can sorcerously medic or medically sorcerer, whatever you prefer to say. Okay. This does have a range requirement. So you're going to need to be in the midfield within red of your guys who are dying. Okay, in order to use this. And then finally we got Foe Blast, a shoot action with a blast of white circle. That's quite a big blast. 4 dice hitting on 3s, 3/4 damage, and on the crit it rends. Not for my money as good as Doom Bolt, but I guess it probably has a niche of its very own. Okay. And finally, that brings us on to the Warp Fire Discipline. Warp Fire Discipline has a really interesting spell in the form of Warp Portal. So Warp Portal, select one friendly Warpcoven operative visible to and within blue of this operative that's not performed an action in which it moved during this turning point. Remove it from the kill zone and set it up again within red of this operative and not within engagement range of an enemy operative. That friendly operative cannot perform actions in which it moves during this turning point. A really interesting, if slightly situational power, but it's tricky, and when there are times it'll come in, if your opponent doesn't play Warpcoven a lot, like I certainly did this a few times, if your opponent doesn't play Warpcoven a lot, they're not going to remember that you can do it, or they might have it in the back of their mind, but they're not going to immediately think of how it applies to the game in front of them, right? So that can be really, really good. Infernal Fire. Select one enemy operative visible to this operative until the end of the turning point. Each time a friendly Warpcoven operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack against that enemy operative in the roll attack dice step of that combat or shooting attack, you can reroll any of your attack dice. And then we've got Firestorm. Perform a free shoot action using the following ranged weapon, and we've got a blast weapon there, barrage blast, range black, indirect. Infernal Fire is a reasonable debuff, each time an operative fights in combat or makes a shooting attack against that enemy operative in the roll attack dice step of that combat shooting attack, you can re-roll any or all of your attack dice. It's pretty good, It's one of those debuffs that makes that person easier to kill. If you've got an enemy that there are a couple of these mechanics around in different teams now. If you've got an enemy that you really just need to destroy, this will give all of the rest of your team a buff for shooting it down, which is good. And the Firestorm, 5 dice, hitting on 4s, 2/2, barrage blast indirect. It's fine. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think it's probably the weakest of the... it's barrage and blast, which is good, but 2/2 damage. But it's got 5 dice, so you could get lucky. There was a really cunningly concealed pause, and now I can't remember whether I already went through the Temperic Discipline. I don't think that I did, so I'm going to go through that briefly. The Temperic Discipline has what is, in my view, one of the signature spells of the Warpcoven, ephemeral instability. During the end of the turning point, subtract white from the distance enemy operatives can move when charging and dashing. Now, this is really, really good. Not least because you just turn it on and go, right, that's mine now, I've turned that on. Yep, that's mine now, I've turned that on. Yep, that's mine now, I've turned that on. Without having to have range or line of sight or any of these things. You just turn it on. And it really messes up. Like when I was playing, I played a lot of novitiates into this team, a couple of months ago. And for novitiates who really want to be in combat, who are using tricks like on the eviscerator totem novitiate with whips to try and get her really up the field, and the fact that these guys just go, no, slow down. Like sisters find that really hard. So that's great. Against shooting teams that don't want to close the gap with you, yeah, they're not going to care. But if you find yourself especially against novitiates or bloodied or one of them melee horde teams, this is a really, really good ability. Temporal manipulation. Select one friendly Warpcoven operative visible to within red of this operative. That operative regains 2d3 lost wounds, so you can have a medic ability. This is where your team's medic comes from. And finally, you've got Foe Blast, a free shoot action, the following ranged weapon. So it's 4 dice, BS3, WS3. Why has it got WS on there? Well, anyway, of course it does. They all do. What? Very tired. Sorry. BS, WS3, damage 3/4, circle blast and rending. A reasonably powerful, a fairly powerful blast attack. So we're going to talk more about those in a minute. We're going to try, and now on the next slide, it's very busy. I'm sorry about this. We're going to try and look at everything in context around the Sorcerer. So let's first of all look at the Sorcerer's data card. The Sorcerer moves 3 circle, has 3 APL, GA1, Def 3, a 3-up save, and 13 wounds. In addition, he has a 5-up invulnerable save. He has the ability of Rubric Command. Once per turning point, when a friendly Rubric Marine operative visible to him within blue of this operative is activated, you can add 1 to its APL. So this is how you try and circumvent the APL issue of all your other rubrics that aren't sorcerers are all APL 2. So this is one way you can try and circumvent that problem by babysitting your Rubric Marines to give them that extra APL. How much you want to do that is up to you, but it's something very important to consider. Okay, now it means if you are babysitting them, the main reason that you want to do this is to interact with missions. But then it does mean that you're sending your sorcerers up with your rubrics to try and get your rubrics to do the mission. So it's one of the... At first you think it's a no-brainer. Of course I want the extra APL. But you don't necessarily want to... Like, you can. And I've seen people have great success pairing everyone off. So everyone has a sorcerer and a guy that stands with the sorcerer. And they go off and do things. Because it is free APL that you want to get out onto the table. But we'll talk about this a little more when we talk about the rubric marines themselves, right? Relentless, so that's part of the weapons. I'll come back to that one. And then, of course, they can manifest their psychic power. And, they recently buffed Rubric Command, so it's not blue, it is in fact red, which makes it a lot easier to get that extra APL out, I feel. With 3 of these guys with an aura of red, you're going to cover a lot of the board by accident, okay? In terms of weapons, you all have a force stave. So 4, 3, 4, 6. The one option, if you want to go full close combat, is to give yourself a force stave and a prospering Kopesh, which then gives you both lethal 5-up, but also it gives you relentless with those melee weapons. So it makes you quite powerful in melee. One of your guys only can have an Inferno Bolt Pistol, which is an AP1 range red. One of your guys only can have the Warp Flame Pistol, which is an AP1 range red, 2/4 damage, 5 dice hitting on 2s, Torrent Black. Really, really quite actually a good gun. Don't worry about trying to kill multiple people with it. 5 dice hitting on 2s, 2/4 AP1 is pretty good. Even better on Into the Dark, where it gains lethal 5-up, right? And then the Inferno Bolt Pistol is a Bolt Pistol with AP1, because that's one of the gimmicks of Thousand Suns. All this stuff has AP1. So we look at the mutations as well, because we didn't read through all of those on the mutation slide. So Warp Swell, add 1 damage to your melee weapons. Mutant Appendage, you can do pickups for free. Avian Talons. If you fight in combat, you perform a charge. During the activation, the result special hits that you combat you. If it did not retain any crits, you can strike one normal hit as if it was a crit. Fate, Paragon of Destiny. Once per turning point, when the operative is fighting in combat or making a shooting attack, or a shooting attack is being made against it, you can use the command reroll Tactical Ploy without spending any CP. Each time you do roll a d6 on a 1 to 3, you lose the ability for the rest of the battle. Incorporeal Sight, ranged weapons the operative is equipped with, excluding ranged weapons with psychic powers, gain lethal 5 up and no cover. Time Walker, you get an extra attack with your melee weapons and you get an extra inch of movement. Like, that's really good. So far, of the first 6, that's the first one I've been like, oh yeah, Time Walker, that's really good. And then in Etheric, you can just straight up give somebody Fly. That's pretty good. You can give somebody a 2-up save. That's pretty good. Or you can improve their baked-in 5-up save to a 4-up save. Situational. Now, these have to be rostered, but then again, there's no reason why you couldn't roster. If you had a guy that had Crystalline most of the time, and then you roster his identical twin that has Empiric Ward, if you're ever in a matchup where you think, actually, the invulnerable saves would be more useful to me. Because you were going into other Thousand Suns, for example, where you know that every weapon has AP1 pretty much, and therefore you'd be like, actually, I want the bonus invulnerable save. Whereas most of the time, I prefer the extra normal save because I know they haven't got that much AP. So you could roster 2 sorcerers like that and have them be effectively the same model. So here's what I would do. I would take a Destiny Sorcerer. The Destiny Sorcerer is interesting because he doesn't have any reason to ever move up the board, right? He doesn't have any ranges on any of his things. He's got Doom Bolt. So Destiny Sorcerer is going to hang out the back of the board. I'd probably give a Bolt Pistol just because nothing else. He's not going to really probably use it at all, so it's kind of like the default pick. He's probably going to hang out near the heavy weapons guy that we'll talk to soon to give him a bonus APL if he should want it for anything. And I'd go for Empiric. No. Well, I've written Empiric Ward. I'd probably go for Crystalline. And then I'd probably roster a second identical Destiny Sorcerer with a Bolt Pistol that would use the same model with Empiric Ward. So I could pick which I wanted between Crystalline and Empiric Ward. You've got the space on your 20-man roster to do this. So I could pick which one I wanted out of Crystalline and Empiric Ward when I'd seen my opponent's army and knew how much AP they had in their force, right? And then I think for my Temporic Operative, I would probably give him the Kopesh, so he's a melee guy, and Time Walker. So I'd make him a melee guy and give him the extra movement and the +1 attacks. Largely because I think... he wants to be able to move around because of his ability to be the medic anyway. So, he wants to be able to move into where the injured people are. So the extra inch of movement is going to help him. He's probably going to find himself in the middle, in mosh pits, in combats, because he's going in trying to medic people. So maybe that's the way that I would play him. Other people... if you're playing against Novitiates or Poxwalkers or someone like this that really needs to come into your face, maybe you hide him behind a wall and you use Ephemeral Instability and you just sort of cut your losses. But I think if I was trying to come up with a build by myself, I would do that. And then finally, for the Warp-Fired Discipline guy, I'll give him he's also going to move around. I'd probably give him Fly and the Warp Flame pistol. He doesn't actually get any benefit from the Warp Flame pistol in that he doesn't get to buff it in any way. But you want him to move around, you want him to be mobile so you can warp portal other parts of your things around. Yeah, I think that's the way I would set it up. Probably. Let me know in the comments if you would do it any differently, but those are the 3 that I would have. The other thing that I would want to have occasionally is... the Mutant Appendage, which lets you do a mission action or the pickup action for free. That's going to be really good in the right kind of mission. So maybe that's a third option for your, let's say, the Destiny guy again, right, who isn't really doing anything. Maybe you want to give him the thing where he can also do free mission actions, so you can run around the back line doing mission actions here, there, and everywhere. Maybe things like that. So yeah, you can roster a few, and Mutant Appendage does stand out as the one that's situationally going to win you games in the right circumstance. Right, we've got through the really dense, difficult part, so now we're talking about the rubrics in general. And we start with the gunner here, but I'll go over their stats in general. So they are all move 3, APL 2, GA 1, Def 3, 3 up save, and 12 wounds. They all have the rule favoured by change, 5 up invulnerable save, and they all have the rule all is dust. Each time a shooting attack is made against the operative, if the ranged weapon has a normal damage characteristic of 3 or less, the operative is treated as having a save of 2 up for that shooting attack. So you can't really chip damage them with little guns very easily, which is really annoying. Like, it's really annoying. They can't move more than 3 circle during their activations. They can't dash and they can't ever charge with the extra circle. Isn't really a massive handicap for them. Like, it's annoying a bit sometimes, but it's not a massive handicap. You're always taking a gunner with a Soul Reaper cannon. The Soul Reaper cannon is what so many other heavy weapons in this game wish they could be. It's very basic. 6 dice, hitting on 3s, 3 4s, AP 1. Right? And it's that AP 1 that makes it worth having. Yes, you could have the Warp Flamer. Yeah, the Warp Flamer's got 1 less dice, but hits on a 2. It's probably going to get slightly more hits. Like, I haven't done the math. Like, oh, it's 1 less dice, but oh, it's hitting on 2s. It's probably going to get slightly more hits. But it's range red, right? If the Soul Reaper cannon had heavy or something that meant that it had to stand still, then I'd say, oh, maybe the Warp Flamer in some scenarios. Now, I don't even think the Warp Flamer is right. Now, I haven't done the maths on this, but I don't even think the Warp Flamer is the right pick in the dark, where it would gain lethal 5 up. I think I would still rather have a Soul Reaper cannon. Now, maybe that's technically wrong, but I just think the utility of a Soul Reaper cannon having infinite range versus the range red limit on the Warp Flamer, I would take the Soul Reaper cannon every day of the week. Right, let's look at Rubric Marines. So this is the basic Rubric Marine. The only difference he has versus the Gunner is the weapon here. So Inferno Bolters, it's a bolter, 4 dice hitting on 3s, 3, 4. AP 1 though. So everything in this team pretty well has AP on it, which is really, really good. And that's it for the Warrior. The Icon Bearer can also count as +1 APL when determining an objective in such a way that it's not a modifier. And once per turn, a friendly sorcerer within red of the operative can perform a free Manifest Psychic Power action during the sorcerer's activation. So by having the Icon Bearer, you can get a free extra Psychic Power off every turn, which is great. Like with a lot of these teams, there's no cost for taking the Icon Bearer. If you're going to take a rubric, you might as well take the Icon Bearer as your first rubric. It's just the rubric with some extra abilities. There's no negatives to it. I really like rubrics. They have high offense. They have high offense. They have AP1 bolters. That's brilliant. They have a really good defense in that they have a 3-up save and a 5-up invulnerable. And if you're shooting them with weapons which damage 3 or less, they have a 2-up save effectively. And the only price they pay for this is being AP2. And don't get me wrong, it's a big price because, if you make a 6-model team and 3 of them are APL2, you're going to have the least AP of anybody in the game. I get that. We've already seen one of the ways around that with keeping the sorcerers near them to give them that 3rd AP. Let's just talk about the basics of what that means, though, being APL2 versus APL3. We're really talking about maneuverability and the ability to do mission objectives. You're still able to move and shoot, right? And even with 3 APL, because of these guys who they are, they won't be able to dash. So it just means that you can't move, shoot, and claim an objective effectively, right? So it's not that big a deal, except where it is. In that some games, some scenarios, it'll be a massive deal, and there's no talking around that. And I imagine they have problems in Into the Dark. With all the doors, where you're going to have to keep your sorcerers lined up really well with the rest of your guard. Does it need line of sight? That'll be very interesting for Into the Dark as well. But it doesn't matter if you need line of sight, does it? Because you can never measure through walls. Yeah, and it does require line of sight as well. So these are going to be an absolute pain into the dark, where you need that extra APL to open doors all the time, and you can't easily get it unless your sorcerer is literally in the same room as you are. Okay? So, something to think about. But by and large, I like rubrics, and I think they are generally underrated. Let's talk about the bird goats. So I don't really rate the bird goats. In many, many games, if I was playing these, it would be 3 sorcerers, a gunner, an icon bearer, and Roy the rubric. But I can see in some missions you might want to swap that last rubric for 2 goats. I do not rate I think that the 10 goats, 1 sorcerer list that people used to talk about on the internet is a meme, and it's stupid. Right? I can't see it. But maybe you want to take 2 sorcerers instead of your last rubric. Maybe. If you're doing it, if you're taking them, let's just look at what the rubric package offers, right? So move 3 circle, APL2, GA1, 3 defense, a save of 6+, and 8 wounds. But they've got a 5 up invulnerable save, so realistically they've got a save of 5 and it's invulnerable. And then you've got a few different guys. So I would always want to take the horn, the horn blower. Yeah, the horn bearer he's called here, which is confusing me. It should be icon bearer and horn blower, or is that just me? Or does he just go, look, a horn? I'm not going to blow it. I'm just going to show it to you. But I think if you're taking Zangors, it's because you decided you want that little bit of extra maneuverability to go and do mission actions. So therefore you take the horn bearer. The horn bearer spends 1 AP and gives all the other Zangors on the board an extra black of movement, which is good. Yeah, it does cost one of his 2 APs. That makes it a bit annoying, but what can you do? What can you do? I would still take the horn bearer. And then second pick would probably be the champion. So the champion has a rule called Savage Assault here. For 1 AP, perform a free fight action with this operative. After completing the action's fight sequence, if this operative is still within engagement range of the enemy operative, you can immediately fight in combat with the operative again. You do not have to select the same target. It's pretty good. You can fight twice, baked in. You've got a choice of a great axe or a great blade. 4 dice, hitting on 3s, 4, 5. The Great Axe has Brutal, the Great Blade has Reap 1. I would go for the Great Axe every day of the week over the Great Blade, because I just don't really rate Reap. It very rarely comes up. That's just me. And then I guess you can go for an Icon Bearer. So the Icon Bearer, again you have to spend an AP. A friendly Zangor within blue of the operative, if they are invigorated by the banner, while operative is invigorated by the banner, improve its invulnerable save by 1. If you're taking a horde of goats, like if you are doing the 10 goat list, then obviously you take the icon bearer, you try and make it work for yourself. But I do not think a big squad of goats is how you're going to play this team, personally. And then we've got the basic Zangor fighter. If you find yourself taking these, I wouldn't bother with the auto pistol and chainsword loadout. I would be going for the Zangor blades every day of the week, because if you're taking them with a view of getting them stuck into people, I think, not plinking away with auto pistols and hoping to do something. So yeah, 4 dice hitting on force, 4, 5 relentless. I do think it's worth chucking away the range shot to get the relentless. That's me. You might not agree, but I would be building them with the Zangor blades, the basic fighters. Yeah, but ultimately, I don't think the bird goats are worthwhile. Right, ploys. The strategic ploys are absolutely excellent on this team. 3 of them anyway. Used to be 2 of them were pretty good, but 3 of them now with this buff from the balanced data slate, these are really, really good ploy. So, exile the start ace for 1 CP. Until the end of the turning point, each time a friendly sorcerer is activated, if it does not perform a shoot action during the activation, it can do 2 fights. If it doesn't perform a fight, it can do 2 shoots. Right? But it must perform... it must select different ranged weapons for these shooting attacks. And the ranged weapons from Psychic Power are eligible for this. That was fine as far as it went, but then in the balanced data slate they added this. Add the following to the Exalted Astarte strategic ploy. In addition, until the end of the turning point, each time a friendly Rubric Marine operative is activated, if it does not perform a fight action during the activation, it can perform 2 shoot actions during the activation. If it's a gunner operative, 1 additional action point must be subtracted for the second shoot action. So now you've got sort of kind of bolter discipline on your AP1 bolters, which is really good. Right? Very hard not to turn that on every turn. You've also got Psychic Domination. Until the end of the turning point, friendly Sorcerer operatives can perform the Manifest Psychic Power option twice during the activation. Very, very good. It will be something you put on every turn, but now you've got Exalted Astartes to put on every turn, and you haven't got that many command points, sadly. But I like it a lot as well. How do you decide whether today is an Exalted Astartes turn or a Psychic Dominion turn? I guess you just have to look at the board, look at where the figures on the board are placed, and decide where you're going to get the most utility from it with those abilities. Slow and Purposeful. Until the end of the turning point, each time friendly Rubric Marine operative makes a shooting attack. If it had not performed a charge action or a normal move action during the turning point, in the roll attack dice step of that shooting attack, you can re-roll any and all of the attack dice with one result, e.g. all the results of a 2. Like, this is also very good, I think. But again, you're going to run into this problem now of this is the third strategic ploy I've said, oh yeah, really good. You've only got so many CP and you've got to ration them. And it's going to be very hard not to do Exalted Astartes and or Psychic Dominion every single turn, which is rapidly going to deplete the points that you have available. Okay? So it's good that we get onto one that's less good. Savage Herd. It might be fun if you're running a herd of Beastmen. Zangors. But it's just not the build that I suggest that you do. Okay? So until the end of the turning point, each time a friendly Zangor operative fights in combat, before rolling your attack dice for that combat, you retain one as a successful normal hit without rolling it. If another friendly Zangor operative is supporting, then you can retain one as a successful critical hit as well. Right, not only is it situational in terms of your roster build, but I just don't think it's as powerful as the other strategic ploys. Give it a swerve. Tactical ploys. Capricious Plan for 1 CP. Use this tactical ploy at the end of a friendly Sorcerer operative's activation. You can immediately perform a free dash action with the operative and change its order. Really, really good when it comes up and you're glad that you have it. Right? Really, really good that your Sorcerer never has to sit out for a turn because you've misplayed slightly. So I like that. You may not have enough CP to spend it because you'll be going Exalted Astartes, Psychic Dominion, but I like it. Similarly, Psychic Cabal, 1 CP, you select a Psychic Power to be resolved by a friendly Sorcerer operative as a result of performing the Manifest Psychic Power action. You can set a Psychic Power from a discipline. Another friendly Sorcerer operative within red of this operative has studied. Which, I guess that will come up now and again as like a... I can do. I've remembered I can do this, and that totally gets me out of a mess. So it's nice to have in the back pocket. I don't think it's something that you do every turn or build a roster around, but it's something nice to have in the back pocket. Mutant Herd, again, it's one about having a lot of things in your, a lot of Zangors in your list, which I'm not advising you do. But the nice about Mutant Herd is you only actually need 2 Zangors, and if you're going to take any number of Zangors, I think 2 would be the number that you would take, right? So use this tactical at the start of friendly Zangor operative activation, select one other ready friendly Zangor operative visible to within blue of that operative that is eligible to be activated. After that operative's activation, activate that other operative before your opponent's operatives operates or performs an Overwatch action, which is a lot of words to say you can activate this guy, then you can activate this other guy over here, right? There's an order of operations that says, I activate Alice, Alice nominates Bob, I complete Bob's activation, and then I go back to Alice. But, essentially it gives them GA2, sure. Schemes of Change, I've seen people use it. It's a great effect because they've been doing badly in a game and they've given themselves a secondary that they've realised, I'm never scoring this. Realistically, I think you should avoid having to use Schemes of Change, but it is there for you if you get yourself into a pickle and find yourself stuck with objectives that you can't score. So to quickly read through Schemes of Change, use this tactical ploy at the start of the target reveal step of the strategy phase, or when you activate a ready friendly Warpcoven operative, discard one of your TAC ops. Any victory points scored associated with it are lost, and randomly determine a new TAC op from your remaining TAC ops deck. So, Warpcoven players, it's really important when you draw the cards to make your deck, you keep the remaining cards separate so you know where you're allowed to draw from. Because that's what it means by TAC ops deck. It means literally the other half of the 6-card deck that you didn't pick. Right, so you've got 3 cards to swap between. It doesn't mean you can go back through your entire library of TAC ops cards. Okay. Right, equipment. Just 1 second. Brings us on nicely to the equipment. Meh. If you're a seasoned Warpcoven player, I most need you to tell me in the comments what I'm missing with the equipment here. It all looks like bobbins. We'll go through the list. Sure, we'll go through the list. Gargoyle Bayonet, 2 EP. Your Rubric Marine gains a melee weapon. Gargoyle Bayonet, 3 attacks. WS3 plus 4/4 damage. Let's go and see what we're actually paying for. Let's go back to the Rubric Marine for a minute here. So the Rubric Marine has fists, 3 attacks, hits on 3s, 3/4 damage. 3 attacks, hits on 3s, 4/4 damage. So you're getting 1 extra point of normal damage for your 2 equipment points for a thing that really doesn't want to be in melee. I mean, it's fine. High capacity magazine, 1 or 3 equipment points. So on an auto pistol, an Inferno bolt pistol, or an Inferno bolt gun, it can be taken. For the auto pistol, it's 1 EP, so if you're taking it on a goat. Otherwise, it's 3 EP, so it's 3 EP for us, our purposes, generally speaking. And it gives you Ceaseless, which is reroll 1s. I think ultimately this is what I'd plump for on my 2. I'm only going to have 2 guys with bolters, right? You know, the Icon Bearer and the regular Thousand Sun. I guess I'd give them both Ceaseless on their bolters for 6 EP. Occult Talisman. Each time the operative would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound or a shooting attack from a psychic power, roll a d6. On a 5-up, the wound is not lost. Yeah. Yeah. There's an errata here, and I have them side by side, and I can't work out what the difference is. Each time this operative would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound or a shooting attack from a psychic power, roll 1d6. On a 5-up, that wound is not lost. It says exactly the same thing down there, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Each time this operative would lose a wound as a result of a mortal wound. Oh, they inserted a comma. I dimly remember the it's even green. I just couldn't. I dimly remember the internet being stupid about this. Do I say it? Do I say it? At the risk of alienating most of my audience, somebody did once remark to me, the majority of rules disputes in Games Workshop games on the internet boil down to the fact that Americans don't seem to understand commas. I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying it's funny and I heard it somewhere. Moving on. The Sorcerer's Scroll for a mighty 4 equipment points. When the operative gains this ability, select 1 psychic power from a discipline the operative has not studied. Once in the battle, when this operative performs the manifest psychic power action, if it is not within engagement range of an enemy operative, you can select that psychic power activated to be chosen. Maybe you take a Sorcerer's Scroll and you take a second, Doom Bolt. I quite like Doom Bolt. Maybe that's worth it to you for 4 EP. I don't know what else you're spending your points on, to be fair. I would probably go for Arcane Robes, which is the next one we're going to read. Once per battle, when critical damage will be inflicted on the operative, you can use this ability to make it inflict normal damage instead. On a sorcerer, that could be good. Maybe the Occult Talisman could be good. I am spending 6 points on magazines and then 4 points on either talismans or robes, I guess. We got in some stuff for Zangors. We can give their auto pistol +1 to the weapon's damage, but we're not taking Zangors with auto pistols, even in the world in which we're taking Zangors. Or Gilded Horns for 1 EP. Each time the operative fights in combat, if you charge in that activation, in the roll attack they step into combat, you can retain one of your dice rolls to 5 up as a crit. Like, if I'm taking Zangors in my list and I spent my 6 points on my magazines, or even my 3 points, so I got points left over, sure, I'll take some Gilded Horns, right? Why not? It's quite good, it's more damage output, so that's fine. It's equipment list's always pretty underwhelming, right? Oh, who's made a typing error? No, this is not. This is TAC Ops. TAC Op. Right. These are depressing as well. This is another of those teams where I'm quite positive about the team, but then the equipment and the TAC Ops are depressing. So, Faction TAC Op 1, Scry Secret. Reveal this TAC Op in the target reveal step of the first turning point. Your opponent selects one of their operatives to be holding a secret. So, again, anything where your opponent is deciding what it is that you want to do, those make me sad. Yeah. And if you perform the Scry Secret action, you go a VP. If at the end of the battle, a friendly operative has performed the Scry Secret action and has not been incapacitated, you gain 1 VP. Your sorcerers can scry secrets. You have to be within red of the guy with the secret. Like, I don't like him. And the same thing to skip down to Faction TAC Op 3. This is even worse. Reveal the faction timer in the first turning point. If your opponent selects one of their operatives and objective marker that's more than red from their kill zone edge, they can't select an objective marker that can be removed. If the enemy operative is incapacitated, you score 1 VP. If you control the objective marker at the end of any turning point, you score 1 VP. The objective marker is not that bad because you can look at the table and there are some matchups where your opponent's selecting an objective marker is not the worst thing because there's only certain ones that they can pick. But the operative that they can then just run around and hide, like, I just don't like doing it. Faction TAC Op 2 is pretty good. So, reveal this TAC Op when a friendly operative performs a Sorcerer's Ritual action. If a friendly operative performs the Sorcerer's Ritual action in 2 or more turning points, you score 1 VP. If a friendly operative performs the Sorcerer's Ritual action in 3 or more turning points, you score 1 VP. Friendly Sorcerer operatives can perform the following mission action. Sorcerer's Ritual. An operative can perform this action while within white of a ritual site, can't perform the action while within white of any operative. A ritual site is the centre of the kill zone or an objective marker that's more than red from your drop zone. Once a friendly operative performs the action, friendly operatives can only perform the action again at the same ritual site. It's pretty good in that you could just kind of do it on a an objective, you know. But you're a team that can have issues with action points because of the 2 APL, and yeah, you get your 30 APL, but it has to be a sorcerer that does it, so yeah. I'd put it in because there are some things in the security deck that I don't want to be doing with this team, but I wouldn't necessarily be picking it. It's not in my top 3 things that I could be doing, but it's okay. Final thoughts. I feel like Thousand Suns are a powerful team. It's taken me a long time to get around to doing this faction rundown because they're a complex team. Like, them and Necrons are the only ones that have this list building stuff where you really got to think about combinations and stuff before the game. Like, 40k players are used to able to have these big conversations about lists and war gear and all these different things, these little things you can pay points for now, like different blessings or different songs or whatever it is. Every army's got a different word for it, but there are all these little extra paid for upgrades you can have. Like, the list building in 40k is very deep. Generally speaking, the list building in Kill Team is really shallow, but it does vary. You've got a scale. I think on one end of the scale sits teams like this and the Necrons, and then the other end of the scale sits teams like the Gelapox and the Star Striders, and then most teams are somewhere in the middle. But there's a lot of choice here, a lot of choice. Online, I know a lot of people say, oh, Thousand Sons are really struggling, but then also online, a lot of people really rate taking loads of Bird Goat Men. Both people that play Thousand Sons against me on the regular basis, or not as regular as I would like in one case, but fairly regular now. In the case of the other, like, they don't use. I don't think either Zimbad or Oro own any goat men. Like, I'm sure Zimbad probably has some, like, on a sprue in a corner, but not painted and ready to go. So it's just funny to me the internet saying, "Oh, definitely play them this way," and then also, but actually we don't think they're very good. It's like, well, have you tried playing them as an elite team? Now, are they better than as a 6-man Space Marine team? Are they better than Intercessors? Probably not. Has Zimbad pivoted to Intercessors now? Yeah, but that can't become the mark. Is this team as good as Intercessors? Probably not. Because then we're just playing in a meta with Intercessors and Pathfinders and, one or two other teams. So, but I like them. I mean, they're a good team. They're a decent team. If you're a Warpcoven expert and I've said something that's hilariously wrong, do let me know down the bottom. Likewise, if I have hilariously stumbled onto something that is conventional wisdom among the Warpcoven community, let me know that as well so I can feel good about myself. That would be great. Subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, subscribing really helps. Like, when we get to like 10,000 subs, Games Workshop might send me some review copies of stuff. That would be nice. That's a long way away, but it just means that we can't rest on our laurels for getting to 1K. We've got to constantly be trying to get more subscribers. Like the video if you could, that would help. And like I say, comment. If you click the thing down the bottom to expand it, you'll see loads of other things. Join the Discord. Join my Instagram. I've got like nobody on Insta. Like, somebody added me on Instagram the other day to be like, "Oh, thanks for featuring me in the community video," and I'm like, "Yeah, I will do that." I've got like less than 500 followers on Instagram. I mean, I know my painting isn't very good, and it's not the main focus of the channel, but even so, if you use that platform, give us a follow on Instagram. It's all down there in the bottom. And thank you to my members. As I said in the last video, absolutely humbling to have like 6 members. It's what's inspired me to kind of fix my audio issues. Paid for this nice little pop filter that's got on the microphone. Apologies for the video today. I had to pause it about 4 times. I'm just really, really wiped out today. Really, really tired. But again, the kind of incentive, the financial incentive of having people out there who are willing to pay for content just kind of goes, no, I will make the video. I won't wave it off for another day and go and do something else. I will make the video. And I enjoyed making it. And thank you. I don't feel that as, like, it is pressure, but it's positive pressure, right? Because I'm now happier having made the video and finished it off than I would be if I just sat here kind of looking at YouTube shorts for 4 hours, which was the way the day was going. So thank you for that. And I'll see you all again really soon. Bye-bye. Cheerio, and have a great rest of your existence.